Well, this year, the Saginaw Spirit are going to get the chance to host the Memorial Cup, and one of their almost inaugural members joined the team in its second year of existence. Pat Asselin joins the show. Great to have you here. Thanks very much for making the time.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I can't believe it's been 20 years since I started there, and yeah, I mean to see where they've come, it's fantastic.
So, how does it feel for you all these years later, thinking back on the team you joined, now going to get the opportunity for the first time to host the Memorial Cup?
I mean, it's great. I mean, I still remember that first year. I mean, we had a really bad team that year, but the goal was, I remember we kind of joked about it a little bit in the dressing room. Like the goal was to win the Memorial Cup. Like, and we all knew like we don't have a very good team, but like it kind of shows you like the organization, like that's been their goal for since they started, since they got it. So 20 years in the making, it's been a long time. So it's great to see them kind of getting rewarded for all the hard work and the dedication that everyone there has put in.
You know, you talk about that mentality and really it not being a strong team when you joined it second year in existence, as I already mentioned. And it's true, you can watch the progression, and it's one thing to look back on it now and say, okay, last place, oops, ninth place. Hey, now we're in the playoffs. Now we're starting on home ice. Like that's kind of what we expect in junior hockey. But when you're in it, I suspect it's a little more challenging than looking back now. You can see the progression, but when you're in that, it's got to be tough at times.
Yeah, I mean it's hard to lose. Like it takes its toll on you, and you don't you need to learn how to win. And I mean, I spent 2 years losing, and then that third year, I think we squeaked into the playoffs, and I think we got swept that year. And then my fourth year, we went for it. Like we had a great team, and but our the Western Conference was stacked that year, and we lost in the first round again. But it just kind of shows you exactly that you like build in cycles a little bit in junior, and we needed to learn how to win. And like it's taken a long time, like when you're a new organization, like to get that, to build those habits and learn how to win. It's hard to, it is super hard to lose and be a part of. And I remember it was very frustrating because we had such lofty goals and we just didn't get them.
It wasn't the only US based team. It still isn't. But as a Peterborough native, when you get drafted in the second round to Saginaw, Michigan, and this new team that had relocated from North Bay, what's going through your mind?
Oh, yeah. I mean, to think back on that, I was just excited to be drafted by anyone, to be honest. I had an idea going into the draft that I'd get drafted, and I think I was a second round pick, which was pretty good. So I was super excited, but I mean, I had no idea. I remember filling out forms for half the teams in the league, about myself back then, and I mean, I was a little bit in the dark. I had a few ideas of some teams that were interested, but you never really know. And then to go to Saginaw in the US, like I didn't really give it that much thought until going to the rookie camp early and kind of meeting everyone, and all the extra little things that you have to do to go to the US. But it wasn't, yeah, it was just more excitement than anything. I didn't have a lot of knowledge of like how it was all going to work, so I didn't have many expectations leading up to it.
Was it important for you guys as a team to build a connection to this new community in Saginaw?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, they did a great job. I mean, everyone always complains about them all the time, but they were getting us into schools and visits all the time, constantly doing things in the community. And looking back on it, I mean, they put so much work into building the community with the hockey team and getting us involved in the community. Um, and yeah, it's come so far since we started.
You talked about, having filled out that paperwork for all of those teams. Obviously, the Ontario Hockey League was a goal for you as a young hockey player. What was it like to finally be there, to have made it to that level?
Um, I mean, it was so cool. I still remember playing my first game. Like, yeah, it brings back such cool memories. Just kind of like sold out rink. We won 5-0 that game, and I scored in my first game, and it's just such a cool feeling, right? And you're just on top of the world. Yeah, it was just incredible to like think back. on those times. And I mean, yeah, after the 5-0, we thought we were gonna win the Memorial Cup that year. To be honest, we won that first game, and we're like, oh man, we are awesome. And then reality kind of sunk in a little bit.
Dennis DeRosier as the head coach that you would have met for the first time when you got there. He was the inaugural coach, and a guy. Well, he's still involved broadcasting there in Saginaw, and the stuff of legend in the city from all of his time playing. What was it like having him as a coach?
Yeah, he was tough. He was a tough coach, hard-nosed coach. Our assistant coach Jamie Hicks, he's from Peterborough, so I had gotten to know him before I went down, and I drove with him to Saginaw and got to know him pretty well. But yeah, Rosie was a tough coach to play for. We had a lot of coaches when I was there, and we had a lot of tough coaches, and he was definitely up there with. We definitely worked hard. We weren't great, but the work ethic and that kind of thing was definitely instilled in us.
I was just thinking, Pat, as you were talking about getting involved in the community and sort of building that connection to Saginaw, you would have been a little bit before the Stephen Colbert connection, right?
No,
Or
that was
that
that was
was
the first year, first or second year with all the Stephen Colbert stuff, getting in with the mascot. I forgot about that and getting us on TV. Yeah, I was there for that.
okay. That's because that's got to be like, again, as you're building a franchise and you're brand new to this league. I mean, they didn't get much bigger than than Colbert back then.
No, and it's funny to look back on for me, as a 16-year-old, like I didn't know who Stephen Colbert was. Like, I mean, I look back now and for the organization, you're like, oh wow, that's incredible. Like, and to see where he's gotten to in his career too, right? At that time, I was like, I don't really know who Stephen Colbert is. Like, didn't quite register with me at the time. And then like I look back on it, I'm like, wow, that was pretty cool. That was a big get for the community and the hockey team.
Absolutely, it was. And you know what? You don't have to feel bad for not knowing who Stephen Colbert was at the time, because I'm a little bit older than you, and I thought, who's this Stephen Colbert guy? So
Yeah, right.
my colleagues had to straighten me out on that too. So
And I
I,
think he grew a lot after that. Like that was still fairly early in his career as well, right? So, yeah, I don't think you need to feel bad either.
maybe just maybe the Saginaw Spirit had a little something to do with Colbert's rise in the late night talk ranks.
Exactly.
You talked about that stacked Western Conference that still had that playoff success eluding you with Saginaw. However, you did find it after the trade to Oshawa. Let's start with the trade itself. I've covered this league for a long time, and trades are transactions, right? But there are people behind them. What's it like? How did it work for you when you learned that you had been traded from Saginaw to Oshawa?
Yeah, it was tough. I mean, I had gone in at the end of the year in our exit interviews, and kind of asked if I could be traded for the next season. Like all the guys that I grew up playing with in Saginaw were kind of moving on. I was kind of one of the last ones in that group, and we weren't going to have a great team the next year, and I would like to win, kind of thing. And then we had coaching changes and management changes throughout the summer. So it was definitely a tough experience, to transition from, yes, we can accommodate you, to then being a little bit more with the new regimen, like we don't really want to trade you. So I had to kind of deal with that. I went back to Saginaw and had to start the year there, which was definitely challenging. And then moving back closer to home and finishing on a good team was kind of my goal for my last season. And then luckily that happened and worked out. And we had a great year in Oshawa. We had loftier goals again, but we went to the Eastern Conference Finals, and then ran into Belleville. Was a great team also that year. And I think we had some goaltending injuries and some injuries, and we just couldn't get it done. But we had a great run, and it was so fun to play deep into the playoffs, and like something I'd been missing for 4 years, and it kind of gets the itch to like keep playing, and that was kind of my goal then throughout the rest of my career, was like playing in the playoffs.
Did it reignite your passion? It sounds a little bit like, you had that deep playoff run. Maybe you're having a little bit more fun in that final year.
For sure it did. Minor hockey team I grew up on, we always won or were like in the top of our league, and then it's always tricky when you go to losing, and it's hard. Winning's fun. Like winning is fun. And it definitely lit a bit of a fire for me for sure, to like wanting to keep playing and keep having that feeling.
Closer to home, yes, in Oshawa, but home, as I think I already mentioned, was Peterborough. And we come on, Pat, like we know Peterborough, Oshawa in the OHL, right? So how's a Peterborough boy feeling putting on the sweater of the Oshawa Generals?
Yeah, and it was always weird in Saginaw just coming back to play in Peterborough was always weird, but we only did it once a year, so it wasn't that often. But then, yeah, putting on the Generals jersey, I mean, I was a diehard Pete's fan when I was a kid. I remember going to all the Pete's games, following the Generals Pete's rivalry. Like even when I was in minor hockey, like you hated Oshawa, it was just so it was weird to go there, and it was really weird to play the Pete's for the first time, especially in Peterborough. Um, I mean, luckily they didn't have a good team that year, so we kind of got on the we won most of those games, but it was definitely it would have been more fun had they been a better team, I think for sure. A bit more of a rivalry, but they weren't great, and we had a really good team. So it was weird the first time. Yeah, it's still kind of weird.
Did you did you have an advantage of any kind as a visitor going into the PMC, maybe having played there earlier? Because those square corners and the, eccentricities of the building can be challenging.
Yeah, you knew the square corners, but to be honest, we didn't play a lot of minor hockey in that rink. There was the odd tournament. I only played at the Memorial Center a couple of times growing up, so and then skating on it for fun every once in a while. But the ice was never. Um, it's almost like it wasn't used that often for minor hockey, the odd tournament, but we didn't play on it that often. So I knew of the square corners and watching all the games there. Um, if it gave me an advantage, I don't know. But at least I had some idea of what to expect because yeah, it's like the acoustics are different, like the puck sounds different on the boards, everything is a little bit different. So at least I was kind of prepared for that for sure.
That Oshawa team you joined in your final year, 07, 08, you talked about how good it was and the lofty goals that it had. Perhaps part of that is because it also had a fellow by the name of John Tavares playing for it. What was it like being around JT, practice games, etc.?
Yeah, I mean, you could just tell he was special, like as soon as I got there. I didn't, being in the Western Conference, I didn't see him very often in his first 2 years, and I didn't get to see him play, or I just kind of heard the stories, and then going there and seeing it firsthand, you could just tell he was going to be something special. Like the extra work on the ice after practice, the way he took care of himself off the ice, just a super nice guy, like down to earth. You could just kind of tell that, oh, this guy's got it. It's like it's easy to see. You can see what all the hype is about, and just a super down to earth, really nice guy. So it was a pleasure playing with him for sure.
That just makes me think, obviously, one of the exceptional players, granted that 15-year-old status into the Ontario Hockey League, and your Saginaw Spirit that we're talking about too, has Michael Misa, another exceptional player who will be the first exceptional player to be on the host team for a Memorial Cup this year, for what
Okay,
that's
wow.
worth. So yeah, yeah. A
Yeah.
lot of talk about the league maybe wanting to have that opportunity to showcase the exceptional player. I guess for obvious reasons. I don't know, but it's interesting.
Yeah, it's super interesting. I mean, and why not when you get those talents? Like I'm sure, especially when you can get them on good teams and they can host, because usually those talents are going to maybe not the greatest team, picking first overall, or and they don't get the exposure. But when you get those kids with the talent on a better team, like what a difference it makes to play with really good players also. It just yeah, it's going to be easier for that player. They're going to just thrive even more, and for everyone to see it, like that's who we want to see is those, Sidney Crosby's, Connor McDavid's, John Tavares. We want to see them playing meaningful hockey games like right off the bat.
Absolutely. That Belleville team that you mentioned that beat you in the Oshawa Generals in the '08 playoffs, and it was a great team. I got to watch them really closely because they went to the final
Right.
against Kitchener, where I broadcast. But that Belleville team had Jan Mursak on it, your former teammate from Saginaw.
Uh-huh.
How weird was it lining up against him after you spent that time together?
Yeah, it was a little bit odd. But also I grew up playing with AJ Perry and Andy Selfer on that team. So I and Mark Canton. So I had a bunch of people from Peterborough on that team, and then he was traded there, and I think Nigel Williams was another one that I played with in Saginaw, got traded there. So it was definitely, it's always weird when you get traded. That was my first experience of playing against former teammates. And it is, it's weird to play against them, but they were, I mean, great teammates in Saginaw. But then once that puck's dropped, you kind of just, you go, you play, you're like doing anything to win. And then after the game, it's kind of over. But it was, yeah, there was quite a few guys on that team I remember that I had some connections with.
Oshawa Peterborough has long been one of the best rivalries in the league. As you were starting out in Saginaw with such a new franchise, was there a team that you would look back at and say, yep, that was our number one rival?
Um, it probably had to be Plymouth. Just being the other American team, we were super close. I mean, they had a great team. Every time we would play them in preseason, we play them 8 times a year, I think, in the division. There was always, fights, and the games are always just extra intense. I would say Plymouth was probably the rivalry, just being the other American team in Michigan and the proximity and how many times we would play them every year. That was for sure would be for sure the rivalry, and then maybe a little bit the Sioux, a little bit more as well. Kind of we were moving up with them, also like had a similar skill set and played them in the playoffs and that kind of thing. I thought the Sioux would probably have been the second team for us.
How did you enjoy those crossings of the Mackinac Bridge to get back and forth to the Sioux?
Yeah, it was it's usually dark. But going up there was always tough. But I mean, as a 16-year-old, 17-year-old, you just don't think about the road trips like I think about them now, or now road trips are a bit of a pain. Um, Looking back on it, you just get on the bus and you go and you're hanging out with the guys, watching movies, or like, we had a great time on the bus. We had a great team. There was always something every year that we were playing, whether it was, playing poker or watching movies or PlayStation or something like that on the bus. So we were always filling the time and hanging out. And these are like the people that you're with, being a 16-year-old away from home. Like this is like your family, right? So the bus trips at that point were nothing.
You're a better man than I am, Pat. I'd tell you what, crossing that bridge, even though it was in the dark, because we often did road trips that went Saginaw to the Sioux, and I
Yeah.
wanted nothing. I still don't want anything to do with that damn bridge. I'll be honest. I don't like them. I don't like bridges like that.
I would probably feel different now that you mention it, but I never gave it a thought. Crossing the bridge was never a thought, to be honest. So like now, maybe when I go across, if I go across, I might be like, oh, I don't know if I want to go across, but it's changed for me now for sure as well.
I can't help but think of when you're talking about movies and the things you would do to pass the time together on the bus. I kind of miss that as an older guy because today everybody's got their own devices and they're sort of lost in their own little world. There's a little bit of card playing that still happens, but there was a time where the movies, and obviously they're played for the entire bus and they're geared towards the players. And I'll never forget the season. I'll bet you we watched Step Brothers on every single road trip. Was there a movie that you guys had as a go-to that stands out to you?
I gotta think if I can remember the specific movie. I remember there was always one or two that were left on the bus, and then it was always the rookie's job to bring movies, right? So
Right.
you're bringing the movies on the bus, but yeah, everyone had to watch. That was the movie you had to watch. I think we had Slapshot on all the time. Um, yeah, everyone has the same thing, right? But you're right. Now everyone's on their phone or their laptop or whatever, and they can bring their own stuff, and it's completely different, completely changed.
We just watched Slapshot again on one of our longer road trips this year. First time in forever that the movie got pulled out. And I'll tell you what, here I am, like I'm still laughing away at that movie. It's classic. It's a timeless for sure.
And how was that for the team? Like, had they seen it, or was it?
No, that was one of the things. One of the new coaches said, "Listen, we got to introduce you guys to this classic hockey movie, right?" And then I'll have to be honest too. Modern times, you cringe a wee bit at some of what was going on there, but it's a
For
completely
sure.
different era. Yeah.
Whether it's what's being said or like what the video quality is like, you can look back and be like, oh, I don't know if that's gonna go over well today. I know my son's 6 now, so I find myself, I'm like, can he watch Happy Gilmore? Like, when can he watch Happy Gilmore or certain movies that I grew up with? It's not quite there. Like last year, we got into the Mighty Ducks. We watched the Mighty Ducks.
Perfect.
We don't watch a ton of movies, but I was like, okay, like when and is it going to go over well with the movies that they watch now? All the animation and the special effects is incredible. So when you watch the old movies, it sometimes doesn't. It's more for me than it is maybe for him.
That's a great point. But hey, we're never going to forget Gordon Bombay and the Mighty Ducks. It's one that I think that's just being a good dad, Pat. You have to
Yeah,
introduce your
I think
kids to
so.
those classics, right?
I think so.
One of the other guys that you would have crossed paths with in Saginaw, and it's my recollection that he was much different as a junior player than as a pro, and of course now how he has reinvented himself. But I'm thinking of Paul Bissonnette. Was there any indication 20 years ago when you were on the ice with him in Saginaw and around him there that he would become the biz nasty that he is today?
I mean, for sure. For sure. I mean, if anyone was going to find a way to make it, it was that guy. I mean, like his work ethic was incredible, and he just kind of like just a big personality all the time, like great teammate, do anything for you. And I remember he turned himself in. I'm trying to think back. It must have been my second year that he turned himself into our tough guy because we didn't have a tough guy. He just went out and was like, I'm just gonna fight everybody and I'm gonna figure it out. I'm gonna get there. It doesn't matter what I have to do. And so you could totally see he was gonna get there, but he's like, We don't have this role. I'm just gonna do it."
How
Yeah.
did you feel about the game with that still being like it's way different? It's moved so quickly, I think, from the era where there had to be that tough guy to where we're at today. And I think we're probably in a better place. I don't mind a little bit of the, physicality and whatnot. And if a couple of big guys want to just, decide they want to do that, fine. But sort of that designated tough guy it just doesn't seem to be around anymore. How do you feel about the way the game's evolved that way?
I mean, I think it's great. I think you need it. I don't think you can get rid of it. I think it's got to be in the game. It's so fast and things happen so quickly, and there's got to be some accountability. And I think if you take it out of the game completely, even just for like even protecting yourself, like being aware when you're on the ice of learning how to take checks and that kind of stuff. But I think my first year, even just a bit before me in my first year, like the league was really tough. Like there was a lot of scary guys, and as a 16-year-old, like 160 pounds, I remember coming in, and I think the Sarnia Sting that year where they had a bunch like a really tough team. And I remember my first game against them, and I was just like, I'm what am I doing out here? And then you kind of settle in and you get to learn and you get to know and we always had usually had a couple tough guys on our team and for the most part, like they're not going out there looking to hurt anybody or get you unless maybe you do something stupid, right? So I think you need that in the game still. I think we've gone to a good place where it's less than it is, especially with all the concussion stuff that we've learned now and that kind of stuff. But you can't get rid of it completely. You've got to keep it in for sure. It's a little bit more in the UK. When I played in the UK, you've still got it there, for sure, and that entertainment value is big time there. But everywhere else, it's still going to happen, and I think you need to keep it in.
That story about being a 16-year-old and being intimidated, feeling intimidated by a tough Sarnia Sting team just makes me think, Pat, 16, and I think we forget about this, especially in junior hockey, because first of all, you're all in the same league. And I always say, once you put on the equipment, we forget that you might be a 16-year-old, 160-pound kid, right? But that 4 years, 16 to 20, is way different than say 32 to 36 in a different
Oh
league
yeah.
at a different right at a different time of life. And it's my belief, but I might be misguided, but guys tended to follow the code, right? Like you said, unless you did something stupid. So as intimidated as you may have felt, it's not like the 20-year-old tough guy on Sarnia was going to come over and start laying a beating on 16-year-old Patrick Asselin.
Yeah, no, and they might try and intimidate you, but as you learn to know, they're not. I'd say 99% of them aren't going to do it. There's the odd crazy guy out there who you can't really trust that they're going to do anything, quite honestly. But yeah, they're not looking to get you. And it's and there is a bit of a code, like if you run someone from behind or head check or something dirty, that you've got to kind of answer the bell for that. And I think that needs to stay in the game. I think it keeps players accountable, keeps them honest. I think there needs to be more emphasis on players protecting themselves when they're playing a little bit. You can kind of see as like that part of the game has left. Even just the like being accountable for your own safety on the ice is kind of gone also a little bit. With like even a lot of the big hits I find that we see and that are very controversial. I think in a lot of ways you can look at it and say you also need to protect yourself.
You're so right about that. I cringe. I've been around the game long enough. I cringe to watch guys cut east-west at the blue line, for example. And you're like, what are you doing? And the game has changed to the point that rarely does anything major happen there, but you're just thinking to yourself, like, you just got to be smarter about that. You can't put yourself in such a vulnerable position out there.
Yeah, like I grew up knowing who's on the ice,
Sure.
knowing, okay, this D-man's on the ice, maybe I won't cut into the middle, right? And it's such a fast game that if you just think you can do whatever you want anywhere, like maybe someone's not trying to take your head off, but it's so fast that you cut across the ice and it's an elbow on your head accidentally, and it's not good, right? So I think so for sure, where you've got to keep that part of the game in it, and players need to kind of be accountable for just being a little bit smarter. Like I said, I always knew who was on the ice. I always knew, what you maybe are gonna where you might go, maybe you don't want to go, and the impact of that.
You mentioned earlier that first game you played, you scored in it. The Saginaw Spirit were going to be 68-0 and win a Memorial Cup. You got the chance. It sounds pretty fantastic to be so close to home for your final season, a nice deep playoff run, playing against all those guys that you had grown up with, etc. Is there a moment, a game, an arena that stands out to you from your time touring through the Ontario Hockey League?
Oh, I mean, always playing in London was always fun. I mean, because it is just like it's huge, and there was always great crowds. I remember playing against, I mean, we lost really bad. I think we lost 10-1 maybe, but I remember playing against that London Knights team that won the Memorial Cup that year. I think it was my second year. And they were just watching that team play. I mean, we were on the other end of a 10-1 loss, but just I remember that playing in that rink was always really cool. It was always really fun. And we had some good wins there as well, but that's not a great one to remember. But just watching the talent on that team was just incredible. Even that whole my first and second year, the talent in the league. I mean, it was great all the way through, but that lockout year, all those guys that should have been in the NHL stayed. That year in general was, even though we lost a lot, it was special just to watch and play against a lot of those players.
That's such a great point, and I'd almost forgotten how good that era was. Plus, you
Yeah.
mentioned the lockout year, and as an opponent, that's got to elevate your game to some degree too, doesn't it?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, anytime you play against someone better than you or the best players, you want to beat them, right? And you've got to bring your best if you want a chance.
You graduate from the Ontario Hockey League, Pat, and you play a year in Germany before coming back and bouncing around the coast for a while in the ECHL. Uh, what led to that decision first to go to Europe right away and then to come back over to North America?
Yeah, I was pretty indecisive what I wanted to do. I kind of looked at all my options, looked at going to school or going to play pro, kind of all summer, right to the last minute. I was actually going to go to Johnstown in the East Coast. One of our old coaches in Saginaw was coaching there, and asked me to come. So I was going to go. And then the first week in September, I had a friend who actually owned a team in Germany and called and was like, "Do you want to come play?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure." Okay, why not? So I just kind of like up and went that week. Called my coach and was like, "Sorry, I don't think I'm ready, to be honest, to play in the East Coast. I don't think I was still just, I just didn't feel ready to do it yet." So I went to Germany with the intent of just like getting better, like getting in the gym, working out a little bit more, um, just kind of experiencing life a little bit, and then having a really good year there, and then wanting to come back and try it in North America. So it's kind of, yeah, it was kind of funny.
how big a difference is there, or was there for you at the time, between European hockey and then North American hockey, particularly in the East Coast League?
Yeah, it was a little bit of a culture shock when I got to Germany, and just the bigger ice, and just playing against men in general was a huge adjustment. You go from, teenagers, and you've got some strong kids, but men just have a different strength. So it took me a long time to kind of adjust to that. And the game, it's a little bit more open. Um, and then I did struggle when I got back to North America. I improved so much that year, in Germany, and then coming back to North America. The hardest thing was just being able to play. I had a really hard time finding a job to begin with, and then sticking somewhere, and then actually getting a shot to play. Took me almost all that the first year that I came back to before I got a chance to play. So it was tricky in the sense I went from being like the top player on my team in Germany and like playing all the time to then not playing. And kind of that was the biggest adjustment.
What led you back to Europe ultimately, where you still play today?
Yeah, I played that year after Germany and kind of got traded and bounced around, didn't have a great year. At the end of the year, someone got hurt on our first line, and I got a chance for a weekend, did really well, and then stayed there and then signed back for the next season. So I had a good year on the East Coast the next year. And then the following year, coming back to Kalamazoo, I had said my goal is to get called up, and if I don't get called up before November, I'm going to go back to Germany. I didn't enjoy the long bus trips. It wasn't as fun for me. I really enjoyed playing in Germany, playing a little bit less, being able to travel. I kind of love that. So I had my goal. I'm like, I'm going to go for it. If I can make it to the American Hockey League, great. Let's like keep going for it. But if I don't get called up by this date, I'm going to try and sign and go back to Germany. So I hadn't gotten called up. I had a great start that year, didn't get called up, and kind of just went in, to my coach and said, I'm gonna move on, and go back to Germany. And that was probably the best thing I did.
It certainly looks that way in retrospect. At the time, Pat, how difficult was it for you? Because I think we all get into this business, into this game with, the goal in mind that we're going to achieve this, that, or the other thing. And when you had to abandon that, when you had to make that decision, said, here's my date. If I don't get called up, I'm out. How difficult was that for you to do?
The actual decision wasn't that hard. Kind of giving up on that part of it, being like, okay, this isn't happening. Like, let's just move on and go to Germany. The hardest part about it was just kind of feeling like you abandoned your teammates, like leaving in that sense, where everyone, it is such a business, and you do have to take care of yourself, but there's still that feeling of like leaving the team behind. Even though I had kind of gone into the season with the goal, and it wasn't like a secret or anything like that, you still feel that a little bit when you leave. So that was probably the hardest thing, less than kind of giving up on the dream of playing in the NHL. You kind of realize, okay, maybe that doesn't happen, or like it kind of hits you really hard when you're 21. Like it's even in junior, like it's so hard to make it. Like when you're a kid, you're like, yeah, I'm gonna play in the NHL. It's like it's the dream. But there's a little bit of a reality check. So I was okay with that part of it. And knowing that I loved playing in Germany my first year. I had a great time. It was hard to come back and go for it. Everyone's saying you should just stay in Germany. You should stay in Germany. So it was okay.
I love what you just said about how difficult it is, right? And even look, it's hard enough to make the Ontario League and then to go beyond there and reach that ultimate prize of the National Hockey League. What advice, Pat, would you give to a 16-year-old player in the Ontario Hockey League today, insofar as the options that exist for that player beyond the Ontario Hockey League?
Yeah, just that, like, if you want to play, there's gonna be somewhere for you to play if you stick with it and work hard. And don't get down. Like I see it a lot now with guys that I've played with who just expect it to be given. Like, don't expect it to be given. Like, you have to work for it and wait for it. Sometimes it's not fair. Sometimes you just have to wait for that opportunity and then make the most of it. Because there's so much politics, and I've had numerous chats with players that I played with recently, where you're growing up playing and you're the best player, and then at the next level you're the best player, and everyone's in the same boat where they're like everybody is the best player where they used to play, right? So just there's so many opportunities in Europe, um, and places to play hockey. Like if you want to play hockey, like don't give up on it. Keep working hard at it and just wait for your opportunity. If things aren't going well, just stick with it and it'll like make the most of that opportunity when it comes.
I was thinking about that being the best player idea when you talked about getting into the OHL and how difficult it was to be on a losing team for those first couple of years because when you were playing minor hockey in Peterborough, you're winning all the time. Because, yeah,
Yeah.
that's how you get to the OHL, right? You're on really good teams and you're one of the better players on those teams. So you get the opportunity, though, later to capture a championship and not just one, back to back to back in Denmark. What's tougher, winning the first one or defending a couple of times?
Oh, I mean, defending for sure. For sure it is. I mean, the first one is it is always so hard to get, but then the hard it's kind of a two answers, I guess. Like it's kind of both. The first one is the hardest to get, but then to keep it, it's you've learned how to win on one hand, like you know what it takes to win and you've learned it. So you've got that going for you, but then the next year every team is plays the best against you, like all season long. You're getting everybody's best being the defending champion. Everybody wants to beat you. Once you get to the playoffs, like you've got that experience of having won. So you understand that a little bit more, I think. So it's kind of twofold. It's the hardest to get the first one, but then it's almost harder to get the second one, because it's just different.
Can you describe the feeling of winning the championship?
It's hard to describe it. And we had such an up and down year the first year that we won. That was the lockout year. We had so there was a and we had a really good team, but a really tough year. We had probably had the best team and ended up finishing fourth in the standings. Just kind of had an up and down year, with our coach and everything, and lots of guys wanting to leave the team, and it was just a bit of a disaster. But we had a really good group of people, and then it was kind of like once the playoffs came, we like flipped a switch, and it was yeah, we ended up winning game seven, 1-0 in overtime in the finals. And it was just a battle. I've looked back on some of the videos, the past year with my son and checked out some of them, and just watching it, it was just, I can't believe that's the hockey that I was playing before. It's like, there's just every whistle, there's something. It's just you're working so hard. There's like checks, like it's so intense. So the feeling of just kind of when you've won is just I don't know how to describe it. It's just something you have to experience. And I think it's different for everybody. Like for me, it was just kind of like relief almost. You're just, you've been working so hard all year and for so many years to this moment. It was, yeah.
After those three championships, Pat, you had a year off, or maybe a gap year, we'd call it in school now. But did you think you were done at that point in 15, 16?
I wasn't even sure, to be honest. At that time, my wife was working in Switzerland, in Zurich, at the international school, and we were expecting our daughter. So she was going on maternity leave. And so we had to stay in Switzerland, and I wasn't going to live somewhere else. So I was either getting a job within the hour, and getting a job in either one of the Swiss leagues is very hard. So I really tried to get something for that year, and I didn't get any. I had no job opportunities, so I just took the year off and stayed home with my daughter. So it was kind of like, and at that point, I wasn't sure if I was going to be done. We're like, let's try and find something, and if nothing comes up, like I'm living at home, kind of no matter what happens. So like we're here, and then kind of once the springtime came around to that season, and I started to miss it a little bit, and me not working in Switzerland. My wife wasn't going to stay either. So at that point, we started to look at going to play hockey again. And then that's how I ended up back in the UK.
Uh, what's more difficult? Going into Sarnia against a big, physical, intimidating defenseman with the sting, or raising an infant daughter as a stay-at-home dad?
I mean, raising the infant daughter for sure. I mean, it was incredible. We had our daughter in July, and my wife. They don't have a great maternity leave in Switzerland, to be honest. So she was off just till Christmas time. But we were off together till Christmas time, the three of us with family visiting, living in Switzerland. So we had a great time hiking and traveling around. And then she went back to work in January, and I was stay-at-home dad, do all the things. So it's not easy. I always say it's the hardest thing and the best thing you'll ever do.
Absolutely agree with that. 100%. You know, you also get me thinking now too. Like we talked about this when you got traded before from Saginaw to Oshawa. You know, as somebody on my side in the media, it's a transaction. When you're moving about and you've bounced around a bit, you mentioned you didn't leave Switzerland because your wife had work there, you couldn't catch on, et cetera. But when it was time, you got that itch, you started missing the game. It's time to move again. It gets harder and harder with a family. You've got to have a really strong supporting cast here, don't you?
Yeah, it's for sure. I mean, my wife's incredible. To just kind of she up and moved to Switzerland. She got a job. She was a speech therapist, so she was working at the international school there. So we could be closer together. She was in Switzerland while I was in Denmark, so we just weren't doing the flight to Canada. And then once we were kind of moving on, then we're just kind of figuring it out together. Like, what do we do? Should we go play hockey? Where do we want to go? So luckily, she's able to do some stuff kind of abroad, and then we would come back home in the summer, and she would pick up some stuff in the summertime, and I'd be at home with the kids. And then during the season, I mean, the hockey lifestyle is great in the sense that, well, we were in Cardiff, we were at the rink till noon, is just in the mornings, and then I'm off. So as far as raising a family goes, we're pretty lucky that the time commitment is not that great. So I was able to spend so much time with the kids and do so many cool things. But yeah, for my wife to just kind of come along with me, and kind of just we've just kind of been that way the whole time. It's kind of like, let's just figure it out as we go. We can plan for the future as much as we want, but we do have to just kind of like piece it together a little bit.
The opportunity to immerse the kids in so many different cultures has got to be pretty attractive to you. How important is it to you as a family to make sure that they get different experiences based on where you're playing?
For sure. I mean, and that's why I play here. Like, I fell in love with traveling when I first started, and so we try and travel as much as we can. Any days off, just kind of getting out. Now we're doing a lot of hiking. My daughter was born in Zurich, and my son was born in Cardiff. And this is kind of the only life they've known. Like, we would pop back home for the summertime. They're both in German school now. They're fluent in German, like, completely. So it's super important for us to be able to travel and have cool life experiences, and they just adapt. I mean, kids are incredible, right? Like, they've never known any different, and we just take them anywhere, and they figure it out, and they don't think twice about it.
It's funny that you just mentioned the kids being fluent in German because I was thinking about the length of time that you've been overseas now. Have you picked up any other languages or parts of them?
My German's getting better, because we've jumped around quite a bit. I mean, Danish was really tricky. I didn't learn very much Danish, and we had mostly English. Our coach was English. And then being in Germany, I've tried to learn a little bit each year. Living in Switzerland, we had Swiss German. Now that we're down in Bavaria, there's a lot of Bayerish. It's also a little bit different than the High German. So my wife's German is really good now. But this is one of the first years where we know we're going to be here for a chunk of time and not moving all the time. So the last 2 years we've really started to try and learn. My wife's much better at staying on top of learning her German than I am. So mine's coming. And at least our kids now are being more helpful. They used to not enjoy helping us with our German, so they're being more helpful. And I mean, I struggle with it a little bit, but I'm getting much better understanding and speaking and getting by. And it's coming slowly, but it's taking me much more time than I would like.
You just remind those little whippersnappers that it's a lot harder for people as we get older, okay?
I do. I know they picked it up so quick. My son came home like 3 months into kindergarten, and all of a sudden he's just speaking German.
That's wild. How's the how's the body? How are the wheels? You feel like you've still got some years left under you?
Yeah, the last couple years, I've gotten back into more interested in taking care of myself just with some injuries and that kind of thing. So I've really started to like dive into taking care of my body a lot more. Like I've always been fit and healthy and fine, but just spending a lot more time learning about my body and how my body is and not just for hockey at this point, but mostly for like later in life. Like with the hockey I'm playing now isn't as serious. It's more fun for me than anything. And I'm actually probably in better shape than I've been in a really, really long time. And I was always in good shape, but just I feel better and just thinking about it, not in terms of hockey performance, but in terms of like life after hockey and being able to function when I'm 50 and 60 and move my body. So started to take just little things I've learned along the way that weren't really taught to me, or you've learned new things now. It's changed quite a bit.
You know, I love that outlook because in my line of work, it's rather sedentary. And then I don't know how much you would have gotten to know behind the scenes at an OHL arena, but on the media side, there's always food, usually
Yeah.
plenty of it. None of it any damn good for you. So I'm I'm getting around to this a little bit later, but in your role and in, for what you do, I'm sure you've seen guys that are just so beat up by the end of things that they
Oh
might
yeah.
be 50 years old and walking like they're 80.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, yeah, it's and myself, I've had some like back issues and I've just never figured it out. So each year I'm working on that and I've started to figure out pieces of it. I mean, it's all so connected that figuring out why I can't move randomly on a day and I'm in a good shape. So trying to figure that kind of stuff out is the biggest challenge and really kind of lit a fire for me. It's like, okay, like I'll wake up some days and I'm healthy and I'm in shape and I can't move. So, what do I need to do? Like this isn't normal. So just kind of going down that journey has been super helpful. And continuing to learn new things and go down that journey.
uh, Along with, bouncing around Europe, continuing to play hockey, raising a family, learning all of these new things about your body and kinesiology, etc. Two Cheeks Studio, where did that all come from?
Cheeks is our old name. So Two Cheeks was our name. We started when we were in Cardiff. I fell in love with photography in Denmark. I had a teammate who brought a camera over, and I was like, "Oh, that's so cool! I'm getting a camera." And I spent all my time traveling around Denmark, just driving on my own, taking photos, like doing landscape stuff. And then when we traveled, doing photos. And then when I was at home with my daughter in Switzerland, I started to seriously think like, what am I going to do when I'm done hockey? And I never had an answer. And photography was kind of in the back of my mind. And when we went to Cardiff, the big selling point in the UK is you can get your MBA. There's usually a couple spots open for teams to bring guys in, and they will go to school for the year, get their MBA, and play hockey. And that didn't interest me, so I actually enrolled at the University of South Wales. I got into the photography program and had signed a 3-year contract, and that fell through the year we came back for my second year. So I sat down with my wife and we're like, all right, like, what am I going to do? And I got a mentor, started to get into photography. I asked my wife, I had a guy on the team who was getting married, asked me to shoot his wedding. And said to my wife, I'm like, do you want to do it with me? She's like, sure. So we got another camera. We started to like learn everything together. And that's kind of how it started. My wife is now full time. But yeah, Two Cheeks is kind of a play on our last name, Asselin. But we've ditched that.
I can't
Our
believe
new,
I didn't make that connection.
no one ever makes that connection. So that's kind of how we started. Last year we rebranded, so now our business name is just Alicia Patrick. So we've changed it, completely rebranded everything. And so yeah, my wife's got a master's degree in speech pathology. She no longer does that. She's full-time photography. And it's always funny now when I go for the last few years, everyone always is like, oh, you'd like to take pictures. And I have to remind them, no, actually, photography is now my main profession. I'm just able to still play hockey while I do it. So,
I gotta think that, I mean, no disrespect to the area where I still live. I'm in southern Ontario, not quite out eastern way, because the Kawarthas and Peterborough is gorgeous. But I don't know, like you're doing really well where you are. It might be. Do you have any plans to come back to North America? Because photography here might be a little more boring. I don't know.
Yeah, it's a little bit different. We started our business and we've marketed ourselves. We lived in Belleville for 4 years, actually, when we moved back home, and then we bought land in Prince Edward County. So we're in plans to build a house in Prince Edward County, and that's kind of where we've marketed our whole business out of is the county. So that's where we do everything. We still shoot 9 or 10 weddings there every summer. That's kind of where we're running everything out of, and we still have plans to come back every year. We stay a little bit longer here, and we've started to move our business like kind of half here, focusing on Italy and Bavaria and like France. So we're shooting a lot more things here in Italy, and then we're able to come home in the summer. Now it gets a little trickier now. With our kids in school, we don't come home as long. So we book our weddings in a very short span in the summer right now, and then we fly home a couple of times a year. Like we fly home in May for a wedding, and then we'll fly home next year a couple of times for weddings, and kind of split the time. So we're still like balancing that and moving a lot of stuff here, which is it's challenging, but it's fun.
I gotta think that 16-year-old Patrick Asselin, drafted into the Ontario Hockey League, would probably not have imagined this career trajectory as still hockey, but sounds like mostly entrepreneur now in photography of all things.
No, definitely not. And it's yeah, like I said, it's like a long time coming. I was always at least aware that I would need something to do when I was done hockey. But I could just never figure out what it was, but always thinking about it. And then the photography just kind of piqued my interest. And honestly, I was never interested in doing weddings. I was like, I don't know if I want to photograph weddings. And then we did it. And then the more I did it, it's a little bit of a rush, like an adrenaline rush, because I don't enjoy playing games when you're winning 6-0, or I don't enjoy that. If it's tied or it's like an intense game or the playoff game and it's close, like I love that, like the high stakes. And I get a little bit of that in photography. You know, you can't miss this moment or this shot happening. It's only happening once. So I get a little bit of an adrenaline rush when I get to do it. And it's kind of fun. So I never would have thought weddings or photography, and here we are. And then starting the business with my wife has been so fun because we're able to bounce all the ideas off each other, kind of work at it together, create our own hours, and everything is a lot of fun.
I love it. And I can certainly see that connection about the importance of that shot and the
Yeah.
pressure that comes with getting it, right? It's the same as the pressure when it's scoreless going into overtime with that first championship in Denmark.
Yeah,
Similar
exactly.
anyway. Yeah, yeah.
You feel alive.
So I first reached out to you, and I'm so glad we got to do this because you're one of those very early members of the Saginaw Spirit, which is the team, as I've already mentioned, and everybody knows, is hosting the Memorial Cup this year. But for those watching on our YouTube channel, and I wondered about this when I learned a little bit more about your background, Peterborough, you're wearing maroon. I don't know if that's on purpose, Pat. That it's Peterborough Pete's-esque colors. What I'm getting at here is, do you hold any allegiance? And is it to Saginaw? Is it to Peterborough? How much of the OHL do you still pay attention to?
I still follow it and keep track of it. I'm not as like up on I don't get a chance to watch it very often, so I'm aware of like some of the players, but I'm not nearly as aware as I used to be when you're in it. As far as allegiance goes, no, I still follow Saginaw and I still root for them. Um, I don't follow Oshawa as much, quite honestly, and root for them as much. I was only there for the half year. I didn't build those super strong ties, I guess. And same with the Pete's. No, sorry about that. My beep. I yeah, I'm not like a Pete's fan, or I mean, it's similar growing up in the area. I'm not like a huge Maple Leafs fan. I'd say I'm a Leafs fan, but I'm not like a diehard Leafs fan. I grew up as a Colorado Avalanche fan. So I like to follow along and root for the teams that I used to play for more than anything. And then it will just depend on where we settle when we come home, and then who my son wants to cheer for, and it will be really interesting.
It will be because, well, there's a lot more of those teams to cheer for now, certainly in the National League than when I was a kid. And yeah, if he, are you going to let him play hockey if you want? Is he playing at all yet?
He's playing right now, so he's
Yeah,
been playing. This was his first year playing, and he loves it.
that's awesome. And there's no team in Belleville right now either, which I think is, well, I mean, no OHL team, which I think is
Yeah.
something that we need to get back into the league, but that's a whole other story.
It is so fun. Like I remember, and I don't know if it would be the same going to like American League games, but going to like junior games and you see them in your community. I remember Pete's players coming to my school when I was a kid in Peterborough, like growing up, knowing some of them. I actually played with Cameron Mann my first year in Germany. He was my line mate for a couple weeks, so he came over kind of randomly, and I got to know them really well. And that was like one of my idols growing up, watching the Pete's play, right? Um, and it's just different, I think, than it is with like a professional sports team, maybe, but I don't know. But yeah, it would be great to get another junior team there.
I think it is different as you've just described. Cameron, man, you could pick a whole lot worse when it comes to players to idolize growing up. And we got to get you at some point, at least, back to the Dow because it's changed quite a bit over the years. And
I
boy, oh boy,
know.
are they ever, they're polishing it up and adding all kinds of things for the Memorial Cup this year. So it's a whole different experience for the fans.
Yeah, I mean, I saw they're trying to get some people back, so I was thinking about I'm going to be home in Canada for that 2 weeks actually for a wedding. So if I can make it down, I'm going to try and make it down for at least a couple days while they're hosting. I think would be fun.
That would be fantastic. And real quick, because you mentioned that again, Alicia Patrick, how do we find more about your photography business online, et cetera?
Yeah, our website is aliciapatrick.com, Alecia, patrick.com, and our Instagram is Alicia Patrick at Alicia Patrick, and it's mostly Instagram and our website.
This has been a ton of fun. Thanks for being so gracious with your time. Continued success as an entrepreneur and a hockey player. And thanks so much for making time to do this with me today.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you so much. I appreciate you having me on.